Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. Please subscribe and keep watching more details. I always knew Will Halstead had a God complex and his Chicago Med exit proves me right. His departure explained. For 10 seasons running, Chicago Med has been one of the most exciting TV shows airing on NBC, as the series follows the emergency department's various nurses and doctors at the fictional Gaffney Chicago Medical Center. Like all the great medical dramas, Chicago Med expertly explores both the personal and professional lives of its diverse cast of characters, who evolve over the course of their time on the show. In fact, one of the greatest strengths of Chicago Med is its cast, whose endless drama makes for highly entertaining television. One character in particular is a shining example of what makes Chicago Med such an interesting series. Played by Nick Gelfus, Dr. Will Halstead was a fan favorite during his time on Chicago Med. He was an attending physician in emergency medicine and often found himself in intense medical situations alongside his major romance with Natalie Manning, another extremely beloved character. But despite his popularity on the show and his skill as a doctor, Will Halstead had one glaring flaw, which ties directly to his Chicago Med exit. Despite being one of the show's main characters for its first 8 seasons, Dr. Will Halstead eventually left Gaffney Chicago Medical Center and Chicago Med completely at the end of season 8. This was followed on the heels of one of the biggest moments in his entire medical career. Chicago Med season 8 saw the introduction of Jack Dayton, a wealthy businessman who made multiple donations, including the OR 2.0, the brand new operating theater that implemented AI to help assist surgeons. After losing one of his patients to an issue with OR 2.0, Will Halstead purposely sabotaged the system to highlight its faults. Though Will thought he was doing something noble, it was actually quite dangerous in hindsight, and it prompted the character to resign from his position. It also shows the biggest issue with Will Halstead as a doctor. Despite being a terrific doctor, Will Halstead had one glaring flaw as a person: his immense God complex that often led to him doing some incredibly questionable things that could borderline on horrific. One of the earliest examples of this is in Chicago Med Season 1, Episode 9, Choices. Will disobeys a DNR, do not resuscitate, for an elderly patient dying of cancer. She just wanted to go home to die in peace, but he convinced her to start a clinical trial that ended up doing nothing, causing her more suffering before her death. In general, Will has shown the capacity to interfere with patients' advance directives, including one where he listened to a dementia patient who didn't necessarily have the capacity to reverse for DNR, ultimately going against what she had initially said, and it could have landed him in big trouble. He likes to meddle in his patients' decisions, often pushing them into what he thinks is the best for them without taking into account their own feelings on the matter. He also isn't hesitant to go against the hospital's protocols when he thinks he is doing the right thing. For example, he decided to go against a Jehovah's Witnesses' religious beliefs to give them a blood transplant, a decision that went against everything he learned as a doctor. There is no shortage of instances in which Will believes he knows better than nearly everyone, even pushing his patients in directions that they don't feel comfortable in. Though Dr. Will Halstead had a significant reason for leaving Gaffney Chicago Medical Center, Nick Gelfus also had his own reasons for moving on from Chicago Med after portraying the character for the first 8 seasons of the show. In an interview with Variety, Gelfus opened up about his departure from Chicago Med, including the main driving force behind it, ultimately wanting to move on to other things as an actor, stating, "Despite leaving Chicago Med for creative reasons, including taking on other acting roles, Gelfus has unfortunately not appeared in anything else since his departure from the show." It's worth noting that he is attached to the film Butterfly in the Typewriter, which is a biographical look at author John Kennedy Toole, though the status of its production is currently up in the air. Despite his early exit, Dr. Will Halstead was an endlessly fascinating character with his God complex, and Nick Gelfus' performance as the character in Chicago Med is one of the show's best. From the moment Dr. Will Halstead strode into Gaffney Chicago Medical Center on Chicago Med, it was clear he had a presence that demanded attention. He wasn't just another ER doctor, he was confident, brash, and at times infuriatingly self-righteous. Over the years, his tenure on the show has been marked by one defining characteristic: a God complex. And now with his departure, it's clearer than ever that this trait has dictated the trajectory of his career, his relationships, and ultimately, his dramatic exit from the show. The hallmarks of Will Halstead's God complex. A God complex in the medical field isn't uncommon in television portrayals of doctors, but Will Halstead took it to another level. He consistently placed himself above hospital protocol, ethics, and even the law, all under the guise of doing what he thought was right. While this might have led to some life-saving moments, it also caused friction with colleagues and superiors alike. From the very beginning, Will's interactions with his boss, Sharon Goodwin, were marked by a blatant disregard for authority. He believed his medical decisions should supersede administrative and ethical concerns, often bending or outright breaking the rules. His belief that he alone knew best put him at odds with everyone, from Dr. Ethan Choi, who valued discipline and structure, to his ex-fiancée, Dr. Natalie Manning, who found herself frequently caught in the whirlwind of his moral superiority. The Natalie Manning effect. Will's relationship with Natalie Manning was perhaps the clearest indicator of his messiah-like attitude. He didn't just want to love her, he wanted to save her, control her, and mold her into his ideal partner. His decisions in their relationship often mirrored his choices in the hospital, impulsive, overbearing, and dismissive of others' autonomy. One of the most glaring examples of this was when Will illegally obtained medication for a patient, a decision that not only jeopardized his career but also placed Natalie in an impossible position. His justifications always came back to the same refrain: "I had to do it, it was the right thing, but who deemed it right?" Will Halstead, of course. His inability to see perspectives beyond his own, to accept that maybe, just maybe, there were consequences beyond his control, was the hallmark of his character arc. The ethical dilemmas that defined him. Throughout the series, Will continuously danced on the edge of ethical violations, and oftentimes he tripped right over it. Whether it was his secret involvement with undercover operations that endangered lives or his habitual disregard for patient consent, his actions painted a picture of a doctor who believed himself to be above the system. Even his tenure at the safe injection site, a storyline that was meant to show his dedication to public health, became more about his personal mission than about the people he was helping. Instead of working within the system to create meaningful change, he bulldozed his way through obstacles, believing that the rules simply did not apply to him. His departure, the final act of self-righteousness. Will Halstead's exit from Chicago Med was the culmination of everything we always suspected about him. After years of pushing boundaries, making reckless decisions, and alienating those around him, he finally reached a point where even he could no longer justify his actions. His final storyline saw him once again taking matters into his own hands, crossing ethical lines, and ultimately facing the consequences of his own hubris. But here's the thing, his departure wasn't a humbling moment. It wasn't a lesson learned, it was, in true Will Halstead fashion, yet another grand, self-imposed exit that underscored his belief that he was simply too good for the world he inhabited. Instead of staying to repair the damage he caused or learning from his mistakes, he walked away as if to say, "This place doesn't deserve me." The legacy of Will Halstead. While his exit may have been inevitable, it does leave behind a lasting impact on Chicago Med. Love him or hate him, Will Halstead was one of the most compelling characters on the show precisely because of his flaws. His God complex made him frustrating, but it also made him interesting. He wasn't just another heroic doctor saving lives, he was a man constantly wrestling with his own self-image, with a need to be the sole savior in a world that demanded teamwork and humility. In the end, his departure doesn't redeem him, nor does it fully condemn him. It simply affirms what we've known all along. Will Halstead always saw himself as the smartest guy in the room, the doctor who could fix anything, the man who refused to bend to the will of others. His exit was merely the final act in a long-running story of a man who could never quite step down from the pedestal he built for himself.